Have you ever wondered why the quietest women leave the loudest echoes in a man's soul? She doesn't need to raise her voice to be remembered. Her presence lingers like perfume in a room, long after she's gone. Not because she pleaded to stay, but because she never begged at all. He didn't notice it then, but her silence wasn't emptiness. It was precision. It was the stillness of a storm that chooses not to rage, even though it could tear the sky in two. She was the kind of woman who knew how to listen, not just to words, but to the space between them, and it unnerved him. Men accustomed to drama do not know how to handle mystery. The quiet woman with the dangerous eyes didn't need to perform to be seen. Her restraint was a riddle he never solved. She did not fill silences with insecurity or laughter with desperation. She sat with her own shadows, sipped her wine slowly, and made peace with solitude. That terrified him because he couldn't dominate what he couldn't define. She wasn't loud, but she was awake. And when a woman is awake, truly awake, the unconscious man will either run or attempt to dull her shine. He tried both. First, he fled, then he returned with apologies dipped in nostalgia. But she had already crossed the river of no return. Like that, doesn't wait at the banks of indecision. She drowns illusions and walks forward barefoot into the fire of self-possession. You see, she was once soft in all the places the world took advantage of. But the burn taught her boundaries. She no longer bleeds for boys who call themselves men. And that's why he regrets her. Not because she left, but because she never asked to be followed. Because she never gave him the satisfaction of watching her break. That woman became a mirror he couldn't bear to look into. And when a man refuses his own reflection, he loses the one woman who could have made him whole. There is a certain punishment built into the architecture of regret. Not the kind that comes from accidental loss, no, the deeper kind. The kind that is earned. The kind a man feels in the marrow of his nights when he remembers the eyes that saw through him, not with judgment, but with eerie, unsettling clarity. Eyes like hers. He remembers now, too late, that she didn't look at him. She looked into him. Past the charm, past the bravado. Past the curated mask he wore for the world. She saw the small boy beneath the man, clutching old wounds and dragging ghosts behind him. And still, she didn't flinch. She didn't try to fix him. She simply observed. That unnerved him more than pity ever could. Because the quiet woman with the dangerous eyes is not maternal. She's not here to mother grown men through their own unwillingness to evolve. Her gaze invites truth, not comfort. She doesn't coddle egos, she exposes them. And in that exposure, many men turn away. Some call her cold, others call her distant. But those are just names invented by the unready, the unevolved, the ones who mistake silence for absence and depth for detachment. The truth is, she felt everything. She always did. But she learned not to perform her feelings like theater for those who wouldn't honor them. She learned to hold her pain like an offering to her own soul, rather than bleed for an audience that clapped only when it suited them. And so when he thinks of her now, it is not her body he misses. It is not the softness of her skin or the poetry of her movements. It is her knowing. That eerie, ancient knowing that stripped him of every mask. The woman who didn't need to raise her voice to make herself unforgettable. The one who taught him, in her absence, what presence truly means. He regrets her now because he can't find her again. Not in the women who laugh too quickly. Not in the ones who chase. Not in the ones who beg to stay. Because the quiet woman never begs. She becomes. There is a strange kind of power in a woman who knows when to walk away without slamming the door. No dramatics, no declarations, just the echo of her absence, replacing the sound of her presence. And that echo lives in his chest like a ghost that won't rest. She didn't need to punish him. That's the part that haunts. Her silence wasn't revenge. It was revelation. The final act of a woman who understood that self-respect is louder than words. That no amount of explanation will awaken a man committed to misunderstanding her. He mistook her quiet for weakness, but her silence was forged in fire. The quiet woman is often the one who has learned the language of chaos and has chosen, with intention, not to speak it. She's not naive. She's experienced. And in that experience, she's become discerning. The woman with the dangerous eyes has already met her shadow, already sat across from it at midnight, already buried the version of herself that needed validation to breathe. So when he thinks back to the way she looked at him, not with need, but with knowledge, he realizes it was never love that scared him. It was her awareness, her terrifying, beautiful awareness that he was still hiding behind a persona. While she stood in the raw, naked truth of herself, he wanted love without awakening. She was the storm that would have shaken him into consciousness, and he wasn't ready. You might think a man would forget a woman like that time would fade her, that other faces would replace hers. But no, she is the exception, the interruption. The moment he wakes up in the middle of the night and reaches for something that isn't there. Not because she vanished, but because he let her slip away when he didn't yet understand the weight of what he held. And you, if you are her, you must understand this. His regret is not your redemption. His awakening is not your responsibility. You were never meant to stay small so that he could feel big. You were never meant to water yourself down just to be digestible. You were meant to rise. She rises not in vengeance, but in vision. For the quiet woman with the dangerous eyes has stopped living in reaction. She no longer contorts herself to fit within the frames others paint for her. She is not here to decorate a man's life while her own remains unexplored. She is not a muse, she is a mirror. And most men do not want to be truly seen. They want the illusion of connection, not the confrontation of their own reflection. He regrets her now because he mistook that mirror for a window. He thought he was peering into her, but all along, she was showing him himself. That's what made her dangerous. Not her volume, not her attitude, but her refusal to play dumb for his comfort. Her refusal to laugh at half-formed jokes or feign softness to protect his ego from collapse. She was never cruel. She was clear. And clarity is the most terrifying form of power when it comes from a woman who refuses to be tamed. She didn't ask him to be perfect, only to be present. She didn't ask for his dominance, only his honesty. But in a world where men are taught to conquer before they connect, the request for vulnerability is often perceived as a threat. He wanted her devotion, but not her discernment. He wanted her beauty, but not her backbone. He wanted to be adored, but not known. And so he tried to silence her power by ignoring her depth, tried to confuse her calm with complacency. But make no mistake, this was no submissive woman. This was a queen who had simply mastered her inner kingdom. And now, he roams through women like a thirsty man sifting sand through his fingers, hoping to feel water again. But none of them look at him like she did. None of them hold space without surrendering their soul. None of them are still enough to make him question his chaos. Because that kind of woman doesn't repeat herself. She doesn't cycle back. She doesn't come when called. She listens to the soul's compass, and when it tells her to leave, she doesn't look back. In the theater of the masculine unconscious, Every man carries a script he's too afraid to revise, a story where he is the savior, the strong one, the center. And yet when he met her, the quiet woman with the dangerous eyes, he felt the edges of that story start to dissolve. She did not need saving. She did not orbit around him. She saw him, and worse, she didn't flinch. Do you know what it does to a man when he's stripped of the fantasy he built around himself? When a woman offers no applause for his performance? When she looks at him like she's met gods before, and he is merely a man, still learning how to pray? It humbles him. But only if he's ready, and most aren't. So he called her too much, or not enough, too mysterious, too quiet, too distant, too hard to read. But what he really meant was too conscious, too sovereign, too unwilling to contort herself into the roles he understood. She was not made to be his next emotional project, nor his trophy of redemption. She was not there to validate his potential. She was there as an invitation to rise, to wake, to burn away the boy and step into the man. But he chose comfort over confrontation, chose familiarity over transformation. And when she finally left, not in rage, but in radiant silence, he expected her to return. They always do, right? Not this one. She didn't just leave the room. She left the story. She folded his name like a love letter never sent and placed it inside the vault of lessons, not losses. And in doing so, she became untouchable, not because she vanished, but because she evolved. Now he scrolls through old photos like they're portals, plays back her laughter in his mind like a song he can't find anymore, tries to trace the moment he stopped being enough, not realizing he never was. Not for the woman who required presence, not performance. And so, his regret grows not from what they had, but from everything he was too afraid to become to keep her. Regret is a teacher with cold hands. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And when it whispers to him now, it sounds like her voice, steady and unbothered, the way it always was when she walked away from something that no longer fed her spirit. He remembers that walk, not hurried, not angry, just done. Because when a quiet woman is done, it's not explosive, it's absolute. He had mistaken her stillness for stasis, but still waters run deep, and she was deeper than he ever dared to swim. Her quiet wasn't passive, it was potent. It was full of discernment, of spiritual boundaries he never understood. She wasn't silent because she didn't have words. She was silent because she had learned that words are wasted on those who only listen to themselves. In her presence, his illusions unraveled. The bravado cracked. The boy beneath the armor trembled. And instead of rising into his own becoming, he recoiled. Because this is the hidden truth. Many men desire feminine softness, but few are prepared for feminine clarity. She was clarity. In her, there was no chaos to distract him from himself, no melodrama to hide behind, only space, space to rise or space to run. And he ran, not from her, but from his own reflection in her gaze. Now, in the absence of her dangerous eyes, he sees the hollowness in the others, the smiles that seek approval, the touch that demands transaction. He misses her because she never asked for more than he could give, only for what was real. She would have held him, but not carried him, loved him, but not saved him. And so, he walks through life like a man who misplaced something vital. Not a thing, a truth, her truth, the truth of being loved by a woman who required nothing but his actual presence. And yet, that was the one thing he could not offer. But you, if you have ever been her, must understand this. Your silence wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. Your leaving wasn't cruelty, it was a birthright. You don't owe softness where you were only ever met with shadow. There comes a moment in every awakened woman's journey when she realizes that her presence is not a gift to be bartered. It is a currency the unconscious cannot afford. She is no longer available for half love or almost effort. The quiet woman with the dangerous eyes has paid the price of her own becoming. And now she walks in a sacred kind of solitude, the kind that no longer craves applause or understanding. She doesn't need to be explained. She needs to be respected. And if that respect isn't offered, she withdraws, not with bitterness, but with grace. You see, a woman like her doesn't leave to teach a man a lesson. She leaves because she learned hers. And that is why he regrets her now, in the still hours of the night, when the masks fall away and the heart speaks unfiltered truths. He regrets not just the loss of her, but the loss of the man he could have been beside her. The man who could have risen into his integrity, who could have stood in full presence, who could have finally outgrown the performance. Because he knows now, her love was never passive. It was precise, and it required everything, not in volume, but in depth. She didn't demand effort. She invited evolution. And when he declined that invitation, she didn't argue. She simply took her soul out of the equation. That is what makes her so unforgettable. Not the shape of her body, or the softness of her skin, or the way she made him feel adored. No, it is the unshakable truth of her. The woman who saw him, who knew him, who stood as a lighthouse even as he drifted into storms of his own making. And now he understands. A woman like her doesn't fight to be chosen. She chooses herself. She walks not in anger, but in alignment. And in doing so, she becomes the rarest kind of ache. The kind that does not fade. The kind that carves its lesson into bone. Because when she left, she didn't slam the door. She became the door. There is something eternal about the woman who walks away without a war. She leaves no blood behind, no desperate final text, no scorched earth, just an emptiness that teaches. And that is why his regret metastasizes, not in anger, but in longing. Because there's no closure in her exit, no last word, just the haunting realization that she never needed to be louder to be heard. Her silence said everything. And in that silence, she reclaimed herself. She is not the woman who waits for closure from the very hand that fractured her spirit. She finds her own endings, writes her own absolution, and buries the unworthy like a ritual of rebirth. Because this is the woman who has faced her inner winter, who has stared down the barren places inside herself and grown gardens anyway. She doesn't need rescuing. She is the resurrection. He didn't understand that her dangerous eyes weren't dangerous because they threatened him. They were dangerous because they revealed him to himself. And revelation is the first step toward ruin or redemption, depending on who's standing at the threshold. He wasn't ready for that threshold. He wanted the kind of woman who would fill his emptiness without ever asking him to face it. But she refused to be the balm for wounds he wouldn't name. She would not be the placeholder for purpose. She had already walked through her own fire. She had no interest in burning for someone else's refusal to evolve. And now he sees her in flashes, a woman passing on the street with that same deliberate poise, a voice in a crowd with that same calm thunder, eyes, fierce, familiar, and unflinching. And every time he wonders, is that her? But he knows the truth. She's gone, and not just from his life, from his reach. Because when a woman like that leaves, she doesn't orbit, she ascends, not above him, beyond him. So if you're her, or becoming her, remember this: you owe no one your diminishment. You were not made to be almost. Your silence is not your weakness, it is your sword. And when you rise in it, you become untouchable. Now he walks with a hollow weight, not because she punished him, but because life did. Life has a way of folding back on itself. A man may outrun a woman, may replace her body, may bury her memory under 1,000 distractions. But one day, the silence she left behind will speak louder than any words she ever said. And when it does, it will say this: you lost a woman who knew herself. She didn't need to prove her worth, she embodied it. She didn't need to compete or plead or perform. Her love was not earned through conquest, but through consciousness. And that's what made her dangerous. Not because she was cruel, but because she would never again love from her wounds, only from her wholeness. The man who loses that kind of woman loses far more than a partner. He loses the mirror that could have turned him into something real. And as the years go on, he may find someone softer, someone easier, someone who doesn't ask hard questions. But easy love never forged kings. Only deep, disarming, divine connection does that. She loved like a force of nature, quiet, deliberate, transformative. And when she walked, she didn't just leave a void in his life. She took with her every future version of him that could have been born in her presence. He remains a shadow of what he could have become, because the woman who would have stood with his soul demanded that he meet her there. And that is why she is remembered. Not for her chaos, but for her clarity. Not for her neediness, but for her nerve. She didn't just walk away. She walked through the noise, through the projection, through the expectations that tried to make her small. And in doing so, she became sovereign. Not spiteful, sacred. So if you are her, or if you're still learning to be, keep walking. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to explain your peace to those who only understand war. You don't need to dim your dangerous eyes for anyone. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. Thank you for watching. If this resonated with you, remember to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this truth today. Your journey toward knowing your worth is the greatest revolution you can start. Until next time, stay fierce, stay grounded, and always choose yourself.